Chris Madsen. Again, thank you for joining us. Maybe you should start by just giving us like a bit of a background about what you do and your role at Engage and VR Immersive Education.
Yeah, so I'm doing business development right now for the North American area. And, a lot of my day is consisting of educating people about virtual reality, showing them what it's all about, especially collaboration in virtual reality, and helping people figure out how they're going to use it for their business, how they're going to use it in their classrooms or remote education. Yeah, a lot of education part of that right now and getting people to figure out how they're going to actually use this. So in my line of work, I deal with a lot of people that are, quite frankly, unfamiliar with VR. And I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but a lot of people think VR could be a 2D experience as well. You're hearing VR being thrown out in all kinds of ways.
Yes.
Verbella's 2D, Second Life is 2D, and people just assume that that's virtual reality. And when they come to us saying, hey, let's do a virtual reality thing, their expectation in many cases is that it is going to be 2D. And I get to have the opportunity to say, oh man, you wait until you try this. This is far beyond 3D. So a lot of education going on right now with that.
It's funny you mentioned that because I had this exact experience. That I'd been making videos on YouTube for a while, and a colleague of mine at work had, caught a few of my videos every now and again, and he was a casual gamer, and then I invited him round one day to try it, and it blew his mind that it was in 3D, and that again, it just didn't correlate from him watching the content that I was making that it actually had any depth to it, and So I think that is a problem with VR that has to be addressed. And I know, certain degree with Live, like the mixed reality videos, that people kind of get an idea that you're actually in the game. But still, people don't necessarily understand that the content is 3D and has real depth to it. Yeah, it's interesting.
One of my little shticks that I do if I'm doing a Zoom screencast or something with someone getting a demo that doesn't have the VR yet is I'll get down and I'll crawl under a virtual table. I'll say, I'm physically getting down on my hands and knees and crawling under the table, and look, there's the gum stuck underneath the table. Then they're kind of going, wait, what? Then they start to get it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So right now, obviously with the pandemic going on, prior to this, were you actually visiting schools and businesses personally, or was it all kind of remote work?
Yes, in some cases we were going out and physically visiting, much like, going to conferences and things like that. I will say even before the pandemic, I was getting to a point where I'd be up giving a talk at a conference and saying, guys, I really shouldn't be doing this. I mean, I missed one of my flights. I got up at 4 a.m. to come do this conference. There's so many reasons why conferences aren't a great idea, and so much of this could be done in virtual reality. But I'll tell you, man, since the pandemic, business is off the charts. Everybody's trying to figure out how to do things digitally to connect person to person in lots of different digital ways. And our phones are ringing off the hook, just like I imagine anybody in this space's phones are ringing off the hook. And people need solutions. They're desperate for solutions. They're really struggling shifting things up. So, it's great that folks like us can provide these solutions where we can be present together despite our geophysical location. Yeah. That's really magic. I look at that as it's a level up for the way humans communicate. Telephones were great. We could now broadcast our voice from person to person. But now that we can actually share experiences together, that's a whole different level, man. That's definitely a level up.
That's something that we've said already for quite a while on the podcast as well. It's something that I would really enjoy myself, and I know Zim said that a couple of times as well. It's having your own virtual office, literally a virtual work environment with a whiteboard and giant screens where you can just work on and do the regular thing you would do if you go into the office. Having that in your home environment and just putting your headset on when you wake up in the morning and going to work. It would be awesome to do something like that instead of taking the bus for 45 minutes or taking a train and heading to work. And I think this pandemic has indeed shown that there is a question for that. The people want a solution for that. So I do hope that something like that starts rolling out after this as well.
It's so cool. I actually do have a persistent office on Engage, and it's just an amazing office because I get to decorate it with things that are important to me. I've got our little HTC statues over there, and I've got this oak tree that's in this poem that Caitlin Krauss put together for a friend of mine that passed away. You can really just make it the way you want it. And I've got this awesome samurai sword that's on the wall behind me. And when guests come in, I'll reach up and pull the samurai sword off that one of our educators uses in one of his lessons. And I'll hand it to him and let him swing it around. I got the sword of Damocles hanging in the corner of my office. How cool is that, you know? And it's persistent. It's always there. You can come in and decorate and it just stays the way you want it. You've got computer monitors and giant screens that can rise out of the floor. It's great.
I like that, like the permanent factor of that as well. Like we were talking about last podcast, I mentioned Peerhead Arcade and getting one of those circus machines where you have the little grabby hand that, you know, goes down, grabs the stuffed animal. And I'd gotten the stuffed animal for my daughter or something, and I had it on the side. But then knowing that I could go back to that stuffed animal, like it had meant something, like I'd earned it. And years ago, that was and the reason I still think Minecraft is such a big deal, because although it's digital, you have to put real work and effort in to get the thing. And that's what I think that like Oculus, in Oculus Home, they did so well. And I would compare it against maybe Steam VR Home, in that objects are of a set scale. They're a fixed thing. They're in a place. They're still there when you come back. And when you get one, it's yours. You know, you keep that and you're able to deploy it or play it around with friends. And you can even have friends come and mess your room up, right? And they're like, at least I got a button to reset it, you know? But there's something about that I think we're all itching for and just like looking for that environment, you know?
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, you know, because a lot of these businesses probably just thought, oh, you know, this virtual reality remote collaboration, it's going to be in the future. Like, we'll just deal with it, you know, in the future when it happens. And it's kind of being forced upon them now in this current climate, you know, so they have to, you know, take notice and actually do some research into it. So like, how has that sort of affected like Engage as a platform? Like, you know, you said that the phones are off the hook right now. You must be crazy busy. But it must also be difficult because getting hold of headsets is difficult as well right now, right? So
it is.
Although the demand is high, getting the technology to actually use it is very hard to get hold of.
It is a challenge, you know. It is hard to get their hands on headsets. I'll tell you, Pico has been pretty amazing. Pico's doing a great job at getting headsets out there. And that's a great business solution. You can brand those headsets, and it's really made for the enterprise sector. Quests obviously have been very difficult to get a hold of. And a lot of folks are starting that engagement on 2D monitors, right? We support the PC, and very soon, you're hearing it here first, we're going to be supporting all the Android standalones, and that includes cell phones, right? I've got Engage running on my cell phone, some prototypes of that, and it's awesome. So a lot of folks are going to be entering VR from their monitors to start with until they can get their hands on headsets.
Right. And I think, you know, from looking at the website, you've got like an onboarding process where businesses can try it out for free right now, right? And then if you're a super large enterprise, then, you know, there must be a subscription model in place or something similar.
So there's some free, you can have a pro version for free and sample out all the different tools. And then we have all kinds of options for enterprise users and education, you know, K through 12 and higher education, where they can just give us a shout. We'll work something out with them where we give them, you know, a free ride for 30 days and let them see what it's all about.
Yeah, that's nice. And in terms of like, say, like education, for an example, like, you know, universities, would they then encourage their students to go and source a headset, or like, how does that work? You know, that kind of remote education aspect.
Yeah, much like a textbook, right? I mean, the fact that we can have 6 DoF for $400 is mind-blowing to me. I mean, we've come down from 2,000 to 400. Now you're talking textbooks range, right? So right now, it's not necessarily the cost that's the barrier anymore. It's just getting your hands on a headset. For higher education, we're seeing a lot of use cases where not only are teachers exploring how to give classes over distance, and in a lot of cases, they might even use Engage and do a YouTube stream from inside Engage, because there is something compelling about the body language and being able to pull out those 3D objects and stuff. So just, and they're doing a lot of special projects in higher education as well. K through 12, what's awesome is you can use Engage not only to do classes and consume these classes, but also learning how to create within virtual reality, because we're at that stage, right? We're in the Minecraft generation where kids need to learn the skills to create in 3D, because that's the future. And so Engage gives them the opportunity to build things and build environments and use editors and dope sheets and timelines and all these things to create in and get a really good taste of how to do that.
Yeah, because I remember a while ago, I think it was about a year ago, we jumped in, I think 3 of us jumped in to Engage, and we had a look around, and there was like a lecture theatre, and we could draw on the whiteboards, and we could take the pew and do a little presentation if we wanted to. And then I remember we went outside, and we sat on a bench, and someone launched it into space, and that was crazy. I don't think that anyone, that was just an experimental thing. But
there was a bit of a problem, though, because we just had a live stream from your office, and apparently it was completely on fire, Chris. I don't know what happened.
Shoot! Do you guys actually have that footage?
Yeah, we had it. Right. That was fun.
Yeah. I hope the cat is still alive.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
But
so,
but it's very what I think is very interesting is that if you are a teacher and who wants to teach in VR, it can create its own lessons.
Yes.
And just be like, okay, this is the subject for this week. Let's say it's about dinosaurs. And it's like, okay, these are the dinosaurs I need. This is the environment I need. Maybe even things that are custom that needs to be created. But the tools you use in Engage are super easy to get into. And I think that's awesome. So you could really, make something interactive. Well, a textbook really, usually, a dinosaur doesn't pop out of a textbook,
Yeah, it's really the evolution of PowerPoint, right? And that's the goal, is to get it as easy to use as a PowerPoint presentation. My background is behavioral science, which I did for 20 years before I made the leap into virtual reality. And so I don't have that background of being a digital creator. So for me to be able to, I remember creating my first experience. I have this 4D experience where it's a BBC underwater experience on a 2D screen. And then I have all the sharks and fish and all these things coming out of the screen into the audience. And the fact that I was able to do that with my limited skill set was revelatory for me. I was like, wow, if I can do this, then any educator can do this. They just need to take the time to learn it. And it's not that difficult.
Yeah, and we've also seen the likes of HTC use Engage recently for their sort of presentation, right?
Yeah, so that's been a little bit of a pivot for us, because we've always been big on the training, education, and being able to communicate with the employees and whatnot. And we've always done events, but the fact that everybody has to take these larger scale events online now too, that is probably our biggest request at this time, is the event sector. And so HTC reached out to us because they were looking at having to cancel their big event in China, right? So they reached out to us, and we put that together in within 2 weeks. It was a crazy amount of work, but it was amazing because we were able to take the speakers such as Alvin Wang Grayland, president of HTC Vive China. We were able to take him, do a recording of him, and then add all these amazing 3D elements to his talk. You'd have, a train. You remember the story of the late 1800s, how people saw their first motion picture of this train that was approaching the screen, and the story goes that people were jumping out of their chair to avoid the train. So we were able to bring that train back in and have it, you could hear it coming, you could see the smoke coming behind the scene, and it bashes through the screen, and people in the audience are like, what is going? It's so compelling and so much fun to do that. Or Peter Diamandis gave a talk there, and he was able to have Socrates appear on the stage with him and interact with Socrates, and Greek columns rising from the floor. It was just so much fun. Again, beyond the PowerPoint.
Absolutely. So Engage is kind of like that kind of education platform. You've got where you can meet up and co-collaborate, remote work and things like that together in the application. But there's also another part of the business, isn't there, which is the VR Immersive Education side, which although they're under the same company, it's kind of separate. Is that right?
Yeah, so it is all the same company, and the way it's worked out, Mike, is we're very well known for the Apollo 11 experience, right? Yeah. That was came out very early on. I think that was even running on the DK1, maybe, if I recall correctly. It was very early and very beloved title, and that did the company very well. That was kind of the launch. That was a Kickstarter title, and it did super well. Then we went on to do Titanic, Berlin Blitz, which I've heard you guys talk about many times.
Yeah, my favorite.
Yeah. And soon to be released Shuttle Commanders coming out for the PC as well, which we're excited about. So those have been doing the company very well, while all this time we've been working in the background on Engage, and finally left early access, I think about 1.5 years ago. Yeah. And here we are today.
And the way I kind of like envisaged the future of this kind of both these platforms together and how they could potentially merge in the future is like, you know, you have like a platform like Engage, but you then take that classroom of kids and then take them to the Titanic, for example, together as a group, you know, and then, you know, because I know like the VR immersive education mantra is kind of learning through experience, right? And I think, you know, it's so important. I think it will be a huge business in the future. But just that idea that, you know, if you went to school as a kid, you know, I hated reading like textbooks as a kid, like, you know, although I had a good imagination, I just was bored. But if a teacher said, look, here's a headset, we're going to learn about the Titanic. We're on a Titanic with all my friends and we're there and we're talking to each other. And then the Titanic actually hits the iceberg and I experience the panic of everything around me. You know, you will never forget that experience.
No,
because
you don't forget it.
You would learn it from actually experiencing it, like I said, like the mantra. Yeah,
exactly. I don't know if you guys have seen this. We actually worked with the Oxford professors, and there's this one professor that's giving a lecture about Venus, right? And at one point, he's like, he opens this portal up to Venus in the Bodleian Library, right? And it's so hot on the surface of Venus. You can actually look down on the ground and see the surface of Venus from actual shots from probes back in like the 70s or 80s, I can't remember. And the whole library just catches on fire. It's like we're burning down the Oxford Bodleian Library. Like you said, you don't forget experiences like that.
Yeah.
You guys are like the ones who create like the magic school bus, but makes it like a reality.
Yeah.
No, it's true. Like if I think about like, me trying the Titanic VR experience, it's like I know exactly what it was all about and what I did. Well, you know, I watched a lot of documentaries about Titanic, but I don't know half of it anymore. But the fact that I feel like I was like a passenger of the Titanic is like, that's something that is usually not possible, and that's why it sticks, because it's so unique on itself.
Yeah. And you mentioned, you know, you've got Quest support in the pipeline. You know, what are the sort of like the bigger challenges that you're kind of like aiming for in the future? If you can maybe talk about a few of those.
Yeah. So we already do support Quest. I would say half of our users right now are Quest users. So we support all the major headsets right now, but you know, now we're going to be supporting phones and things of that nature. So really going forward for us, it's helping people solve these solutions of the fact that they have to work remotely with each other, helping schools figure out how they're going to do remote education. I think homeschooling is going to be VR should be a part of all homeschooling programs, I think. And really refining. What's awesome is now that we're getting all of this attention, it really gives us this great opportunity to refine our tools to specifically what people need to be doing. We always say that one thing we want to do in VR when we're talking about collaboration is we need to at least capture the important elements that make real life face-to-face contact. We need to be able to reproduce that accurately and not lose that. And at the same time, give us tools that can go beyond what we can do in real life. Let me give you an example of that. We have a spatial recording feature on Engage where we could all be meeting in VR right now. I could hit that recording button and capture us all spatially, rewind time essentially, and step right back into our meeting as though we were there the original first time. And I could walk around you guys, I can walk around my own body, which that makes things really compelling, because now what that allows teachers to do is stand up in their headset, give their lecture, and they can spatially capture that and then put that up as a lesson, or take it into our editor and then add all those 3D elements around themselves.
Awesome. Like when you think about it, like the way it could change like the future, when you think of like, you know, 10, 20 years time, you know, and, you know, it feels like you're really paving the way for the future right now, you know, setting the foundations in. But when you think about like 20 years time from now, you know, what could be possible, or what could people be doing, particularly in like poorer countries where people, maybe it's too dangerous to travel to school, or it's too expensive to travel to school, and you can get this amazing education from home from maybe some of the world's best teachers, and you're all sort of logging in remotely. You know, it really becomes very, very exciting. And, you know, this whole prospect of like Ready Player One, you know, being in school in VR as well is also a very exciting prospect as well.
True.
Yeah, we just did this week. We worked with River, I mentioned earlier. They're photogrammetry specialists, and they did a class, and we had so much feedback of saying this is the best night school we've ever done, where we actually took the pieces that they made into photogrammetry, we brought those into Engage. We were able to scale those up to life size and literally walk around and use the camera system with 50 other people in the room to show the proper angles of where you need to take these pictures and how you use the drone to fly around and actually bring in a drone to do the flights. And that's hands-on. You're not going to get that in any other medium, that you can actually get those angles and do it properly. And it was a 90-minute class, and it was just mind-blowing for everybody.
Nice.
So what if a consumer wants to try Engage? What can they, let's say, do? Do they need to go to your website and check out events, or?
So they'll go to www.engagevr.io, and you can get started right away, register with an account, get in there for free. Keep an eye on the website for different events that are happening throughout the week. We've got an awesome talk show that's coming up where they're going to show off some really cool 360 videos that are intermingled with 3D objects. It's kind of a mix of the two that really creates some magic. So keep an eye on the calendar for those sorts of events. And every Wednesday, our Irish team does a tour and shows you how to use the product and the different features in there. So definitely hop in for a tour of that as well.
Okay. And if you are a business, you should just call or
give us. We got a little form right there on the website that you can fill out, and I or my European counterparts will be giving you a shout.
Awesome. And the last thing I want to sort of ask before we sort of move on to sort of game releases this week is what's kind of like been the most interesting use cases of the Engage platform so far that you've seen? Something that's really sort of like creative use case.
Creative use case. I think the photogrammetry one I just mentioned, but even, like having a NASA representative come and not only take us up the Saturn V and give us all of those backstories that you never hear from anywhere. And you mentioned earlier, that's one of the key things, is being able to have actual professionals that have stories behind what they're teaching is so powerful. The fact that we can create a fire experience, like we just did that one that you guys obviously took a look at, where you're running around and you're actually trying to put out fires and you're feeling that adrenaline rush, which is so important to training. You want that adrenaline because you need to learn to work through that adrenaline feeling, right? That's part of training. We're working with Stanford right now on bringing in these amazing cadaver pieces where they're doing these instructions on the body. Just so much happening behind the scenes right now that we're looking forward to revealing more of that as time goes on.
Yeah, I can't wait for the next VR Immersive Education piece, because, I was a big fan of the Berlin Blitz. It's still one of like those standout experiences that you'll never forget if you go and check it out. And if you haven't, go check it out. It's free. It's on Steam. It's on Oculus. It's an amazing one-off experience. Yeah.